Okay, my family, we are back to reading Biology of Kundalini, and what I am loving about this is as we're reading, and I don't know if you're noticing, if you're watching all the videos or you're just checking in on some of them, that reading these together is creating an amazing shift. And it's shifting my reality as I'm reading, and I'm like noticing where the processes that we're reading about are showing up in my life. And right now I'm reading to you from the floor, my new floor little nook, because I just got rid of my bed today. I'm getting ready to move across the country, and I've just been liquidating my house, and I've definitely been in the dissolve stage, just like we've been talking about. So it's pretty cool how these things correlate. So we're going to be reading page 118 today in Biology of Kundalini by Jana, Dixon, dropping the pain body. And couldn't we all use some of that? So here we go. We'll discuss as we go along, as we do. Pain is in the nature of a nervous and physical recoil from a dangerous or harmful contact. It is part of what the Upanishad called jugupsa, the shrinking of the limited being from that which is not himself and not sympathetic or in harmony with himself. It's an impulse of self-defense against others. That's Sri Aurobindo, The Life Divine, page 117. So she goes on to say, because of the attachment to our pain, the hardest thing to handle is the bliss of our own emergence. Because of the attachment to our pain. Either we want to retreat from the limitless space of bliss into the pain body, or we want to turn to the bliss into some self-indulgent ego gratification. To leave the bliss pure in its essence is almost impossible at the beginning of the transmutational process. Kundalini is not usually painful. There might be some neuralgic pain years prior to an awakening and for short periods during the peak. And the heart expansions can be painful as the heart explodes in the chest. Definitely, I noticed that. And there might be pain during die-off. But there's usually so many opiates floating through the system that there's far less pain in the body than normally. Pain is usually the result of obstruction, toxicity, or dehydration. Kundalini pain occurs when there's blockage to the energy, and bliss is the result of the flow of Kundalini. As Kundalini moves through the parts of the body that were numb to us, we feel the extent of our contraction, right? But as Shakti does her work and we start to open up, what was once painful turns to bliss if you move into the pain with the mind's eye. So our tendency is to recoil and shrink, but if instead we just allow and open, then the Kundalini can flow in, right? We can equate the pain body with William Reich's body armor. He's the orgonite guy, the orgon dude. Neurosis and psychosis and negative ego characteristics all stem from embeddedness in our pain. Neurosis and psychosis. Embeddedness in our pain remembering mechanisms in the hippocampus and hypothalamus and amygdala, and consequently in the neuromuscular of the whole body as well. So in all of the muscles connecting to our brain impulses, we have memory, pain memory, that is creating the psychosis, that is creating negative ego characteristics. We become addicted to our pain body, perhaps because we have found validity for our existence through pain. Now that's a really common phenomenon. Validity for our existence through pain. Now that doesn't mean we shouldn't validate the pain. We definitely can, but we just don't want to get stuck in that. It seems we continually want to go back and revisit our pain so we can feel like we remember who we are. But this is just the perpetuation of the memory of the false self. Stimulation of our adrenals and dopamine in response to hurtful situations makes us feel alive. Defending our rights is defining our Boundaries. Defending our rights is defining our boundaries as an individual, and this makes us feel real. A solid thing that the ego finds reassurance in. So yes, there's a phase when you want to like create boundaries and you want to defend and all that. That's definitely a stage of empowerment. But she's saying you don't really want to stay there because it's actually a false pain body self that fills that need to defend, right? Attainment of the self with a big S, however, requires the melting of this limiting defense structure, which might have been needed in the individuation stage, but it is a burden during the enlightenment stage. The caterpillar is completely consumed in the construction of the butterfly. As conditioning unwinds, those with active Kundalini are more elemental and archetypal. The cerebral cortex is incapacitated through overcharge, while the limbic and autonomic brain are hyperactive. As Kundalini moves through the brain, intense emotions are felt. In the beginning stage, this is often panic, anxiety, depression, anger, paranoia, confusion, shame, fear, self-pity. That's, big feelings. These negative emotions tend to take over, especially when the left brain is in clamped down from the overcharge. Then, as at the work of purging and restructuring, as this proceeds, there's more enduring bliss, peace, equanimity, love, and joy. If the cleansing work is not done, however, instead of attaining a true witness, we repress pain and shadow through disassociation. Disassociation is still a separate self-sense. It is just the lower order of escape through not allowing the full embodiment of the self with a big S. This need for the work of nature to take its transmutational course is why surrender is fundamental to genuine spiritual growth. We have to learn to surrender. We have to learn to let go through those boundaries, through those emotions. Yeah, feel them at first, validate them, but then we have to learn to surrender beyond them. In fact, the need for nature to take its course is probably why cathartic release type therapies like holotropic breathing and Osho's dynamic meditations work so well. The freeze response to danger is countermanded such that accumulated shock is released and the chemistry can be resolved and let go. These releasing practices and kriyas in general allow the psychosomatic noise to be cleansed from the system, permitting normal and supernormal conditions of consciousness to occur. So we do want to get those out. There's no avoiding the fire. The emotion has to burn the fires of purification before the illuminative wisdom and unitive balance is achieved. So we can't skip the step of burning through some of these old emotions. We can't judge someone for being in that place either, but we just don't want to get stuck in that process. This process of roasting in the fires of transformation creates the philosopher's stone of self. Once the body-mind's resistance to conveying greater consciousness is penetrated, the nervous system enters a permanent state of higher functioning. Kundalini's transformation of the limbic brain means there is a lessening of the ability to condition the brain to fear and pain, and a lessening of the pain body and armor. The pain body is still there in potentiality because it would be extremely dangerous to live without the information that pain provides. Pain is an essential part of the path to bliss. Kundalini meditation, yoga, breathing does alter the pain mechanisms in the body such that we do have more distance from the automated reactive mode of the reptilian functions, or rather, we're no longer a petty tyrant sitting on an errant horse riding and sitting on a horse. Rider and horse are now one in primordial impeccability. She's saying we're not just like away from the process. The pain body is composed of our negative and unconscious shadow material and magnetically attracts more of its own vibration to itself. So we need to apply conscious effort toward awakening and alivening in order to transcend the gravimetric pull of the lower emotional states. So like does attract like, right? Whatever we focus on grows. When we resonate in these lower frequencies, we can easily become overwhelmed and controlled by others, for we don't have any distance from those dark energies. We can learn to not resonate in response to darkness, but to see it for what it is, to breathe through it, to pass quickly beyond and pick up speed, energy, power, and focus. To do this, we need to be aware of the unconscious programming of the fear, shame, guilt, and original sin that we may still embody. So we need that awareness, observer faculty working. Thus, if we find ourselves getting stuck over personality issues with others or the collective darkness, we can directly become aware of the work that we still need to do to cleanse our vehicles of life-destroying energies. So we need to just do our shadow work when we're in that state of obsession on the darkness in the world. We need to find that in us, love that about ourselves. We suffer when we perceive our experience in an egoic, personal, and downer kind of way. Even bliss is suffering unless it is turned toward soul gratification rather than toward ego gratification. However, without suffering, we wouldn't get the intuition to turn increasingly toward soul. So see how suffering has its role. Pain, wounds, and shadow are the key to our evolution. For if we address these things that prevent the full flow of light and faith, we free ourselves from our self-constructed cage. And it's all purposeful, right? The generation of bliss from having done this work constitutes an evolution beyond the pain body. The pain mechanisms are still there, however, but our neurology is so lit up in bliss that we have transcended our pain body. Ramakrishna says that a man's spiritual consciousness is not awakened unless his Kundalini is aroused. Kundalini is the fire of individuation. Spirituality, in my mind, her mind, is the transcendence of culture. It is a new emergent, added dimensions beyond cultural conditioning, through the building of the personal umbilical to the divine cosmos via the initiation of the solar heart. Spirituality is creative redemption. That is reclaiming the universal self from the abuses, the stigmas, the power trips, the seductions, the manipulations, and original sin of society at large. Reclaiming the self, cosmic self. Certainly there is no faster and more complete way of emerging from the separate self sense and the pain body than through the fires of active Kundalini. Through allowing nature to take her course. I mean, that's what it's supposed to do. We're supposed to evolve to that place. That's the way we are built. The Christ light, Kundalini, is said to burn away one's past sins, life-harming trauma. But even though the body is more efficient after considerable transmutation, if we maintain the normal eating and health habits of the standard society, the body will continue to be aged and decay via all those free radicals we talked about. One could say the free radicals are the agent of sin. Much of what we do physically, mentally, and emotionally in this culture just increases the free radical load. That is why most old people look broken at the end of their lives. It doesn't have to be this way, she says, if we learn to master stress and free radicals, which is why our superfoods and filtered water and so forth comes in so strong. It's probably pretty common that we seek to run from pleasure into pain. We're used to pain. Pain is the German ethic, the white man's safety zone. In Kundalini, it is easier to handle pain than extreme bliss, for pain is less work than extreme bliss, she says. If we don't have the skills to open to pleasure, we may try to clog up our bodies to buffer ourselves from this bliss. In ecstasy, we actually don't have control. If we come from a trauma background, we expect and want things to go wrong, so we can stick to our familiar mode of being. Imagine that. Evolution requires us to learn to endure beauty and pleasure without closing down and retreating. Also consider that you are the universe observing itself. Therefore, you are big enough to handle all the beauty in the entire universe. Love is merely going with the speed of evolution and fear is backing down from that speed and grace. Resistance to evolution is the fear of letting go of our former identity. Developmental level, worldview, opinions, sensual sensitivity level, and habitual groove of consciousness. Growth requires the dissolution of all this before the birth of the new. I'm personally in a big growth process right now, and as I was saying, the dissolving of the previous structure that is sometimes physically showing up for us. Like right now, I'm literally getting rid of so many physical objects. Furniture, my bed, clothing, dishes, wall hangings, rugs, outside furniture. That's part of the dissolve. Growth requires the dissolution of all this before the birth of the new. You can't birth a new reality somewhere. I mean, sure, we try to take moving trucks sometimes and bring it all with us, but sometimes I think that can be fine. But there are times that we want to recreate ourselves, and when we're dragging all that old life behind, we don't really ever get away from those energies. We must essentially lose possession of ourselves, or lose our possessions, in order to provide space for the repatterning of greater soul. Dion Fortune says that consciousness is raised to a given plane by inhibiting the thoughts and mode of consciousness of all the planes below it. Interesting. Inhibiting the thoughts and modes of consciousness of all the planes below it. Consciousness is then raised. She says, but I doubt that inhibition ever leads to evolution, for you cannot evolve that which is repressed and what is not called into consciousness in the first place. There must be a full acknowledgement of the present self through which the neurotic anesthesiation is lifted by presence. Really, because we're anesthetized to ourselves, like we can't remember, we're numbed. So we have to lift that and become conscious of our full self and accept and love all that, become present with ourselves, naturally infusing and raising our being to a higher level. So contrary to the old aesthetic Puritan idea of sublimation and inhibition, which even some churches today practice, we evolve by fully inhabiting and utilizing that which we are without resistance or rejection. The alchemy is thus quickened, and the amplification of fructifying tensions and stormy energies then result in the inevitable depth of a calm and more mature spiritual condition. So it's bumpy for a minute because we're going through that ride of like amplifying some of the tensions to get them up and out, right? As Osho says in Body Mind Balancing, man is unhealthy and pathological because society has crippled him in many ways. You are not allowed to love totally. You are not allowed to be angry. You are not allowed to be yourself. 1,001 limitations are enforced. End quote. Families and communities that will not allow you to show up, where each is a rote-learned cog in the commercial machine, this is not a society, and one is not a citizen, but a subject. This is the roots of the pain body, or armoring, and fascism that Reich and Charles Konya calls the emotional plague. Charles Konya, MD, has a new book called The Emotional Plague, The Root of Human Evil. This book explores the disease of destructive human behavior involving people's emotional lives that can be spread from person to person with all the characteristics of an infectious disease. Armoring is essentially the absence of presence, and oh boy, have we not seen fear spread like a plague over these past couple of years. And that's like a mass formation psychosis we've seen, where people are just following along and okay, doing what they're told because they're afraid and they're resisting, right? The pain body can be seen as an energy field of cellular memory, whose prime directive is the generation and accumulation of pain and the continuation of perception filters that generate suffering. When disease, dysfunction, imbalance, or lack of peace occur at any level, you can be sure that the imbalance of the undigested trauma stays with us, usurping our positive emotional state. The pain body represents the sum of the pain in the past that still lives in our mind and in our body and is playing an active role in perpetuating its own existence. But the pain body is not so much an entity as it is an energetic standing pattern or a habitual dissonant state. Stopping the process of stress mid-cycle means distress becomes internalized. The accumulated pain comprised of negative energy fields of stagnant life force that cause cellular dysfunction, toxicity, and vulnerability to infection and disease. The area of stagnant energy contains unhealthy electromagnetic fields that literally split and subdivide the body's energy field into separate compartments with reduced communication between them. Through the law of emotional resonance, the pain body attracts more distressing circumstances into our experience. You know, when you're feeling pain, you're feeling down, when you're feeling negative, when you're feeling like poverty or separate or lonely, you're attracting more of that. So it's reinforcing your belief because you've created this energy field now that's drawing more like it to itself, right? This ongoing generation of emotional toxicity prevents the experience of peace, connection, cohesion, and coherence of spiritual stabilization. Thus, the ego's attachment to the pain body must be released for the spiritual life to emerge. So we just have to not be attached to it anymore. Releasing the negative emotional field involves the felt sense acknowledgement, acceptance, and allowance of feelings without reactivity or judgment as to whether they're good or bad. So we just like let ourselves feel what we need to feel. Thus, liberation from the pain body is a type of equanimous reality therapy, addressing the truth of the accumulation within all of us, within the negative experiences, resistance, and disappointments that we've ever had. Unconsciously, through the lack of objective understanding and mindfulness, we get used to the perceptive filters that caused our suffering. We're just used to it. In this unconscious pain filter that must be loved to a higher order of frequency, she says it is this unconscious pain filter that must be loved to a higher order of frequency, health, unification. Transforming the stagnant negative energy field that holds our cells captive by feeling into the dark void of the wound and filling it with the warmth and light. When we fully accept the reality of now, then it passes us and it doesn't get stuck as karmic residue in our tissues. So we're going to go ahead and end there. The next section we'll read is the mathematics of awakenings, super fascinating. And then we're into part 4. So tomorrow, the next time I come on, I hope it's tomorrow, will be fairly short. And then I'm so excited we're into part 4 where we get into the physiology of Kundalini itself. So that was awesome. Dropping the pain body. You know, Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about the pain body. So that's just giving a little bit more kind of background to that we just basically come to expect certain things, and we actually create a condition within our body that attracts the same conditions. And then it's easier to be attracted to pain because we're familiar with it, or our family created that kind of scenario, and then it can actually be scarier to surrender into bliss. And that's why orgasms just don't happen for most people. And that's a sad truth, because that is a very blissful state. That is the full activation of Kundalini in the whole body. If you really let that energy flow, if you really allow yourself to be loved and taken into that place, well, not just sexual orgasm, but Kundalini is a life orgasm, an ability to surrender into the flow, the trusting flow, the synchronistic flow of life, where life is guiding us. That flow, the web, the network of creation is helping us get from one thing to another. And if we think we know and we try to grasp a concept or try to hold on to something, we really get stuck, because then the pain body patterns start playing out, and then we get tense, and then things start hurting, and then we start stressing out, and then we perpetuate this state. So learning to breathe, right? Meditate, trust, feel ourselves relaxing. Relaxation practices are so key, and I highly recommend Yoga Nidra for that. And some people, just a little side note on that, and a little like maybe warning or precursor, some people start listening to Yoga Nidras, and I have a lot on this YouTube channel under yoga and meditation. If you've never done one before, there is like a rapid rotation of consciousness part where it seems like the meditation's going very fast. And I've had people come back and say, oh, I can't do that. That stresses me out. I can't relax for that. And what you want to do is actually just let your consciousness do it. You're not trying to do it with your mind. You're just allowing the words to like guide you around, and you're just actually observing the whole process. You don't have to like consciously think about any of the meditation. You just allow it to happen to you. And it really is very unloading. It's very like defragmenting your programs and all of that, and unloading a lot from the pain body and just helping us tune back into the bliss body, which is our natural state. So thank you again for joining me. If you liked this video, please like it. That does help me show up in the algorithms, and you can share this if it was helpful. I hope that you will subscribe so you know when I am doing another one. I hope you're following along. Remember, if you need personal assistance, send me an email, stasiabliss@gmail.com. I work on a sliding scale with people one-on-one. Yeah, there's just so much more we can do together. So thank you so much for joining me. I love you so much. And here's to your awakening.